What if Bell was more than an adventurer? The ice spirit bound to Aiz Waldstein.
Hello everyone, welcome to What If Bell Was Ice Spirit Guardian of Aiz Waldstein movie. Before we start, please go support tenma-sama for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistaken character's gender, but of course Bell is a male. Lost. I was lost. He was a lost spirit. A spirit who saw the death and massacre of his own, a spirit who swore to protect his queen from that great calamity and failed, a spirit who fought alongside the legendary mercenary king against that great calamity and lost. And now, with everything lost, he searches for a reason to live, and after a long sleep of thousands of years, he swears again before the edge of his sword to protect the legacy of his masters. A little girl with golden hair. A hybrid of its kind. A semi-spirit. Aiz Waldstein, the daughter of Albert Waldstein, the legendary swordsman, and Arya, the wind spirit. And with a promise made, he dedicated himself to searching for that little girl whom he had the duty to protect. After all, he was also her godfather. He was Bell, the spirit of ice. The awakening, prologue. Darkness. Only darkness. It was the only thing that could be seen in a small hidden cave. It was somewhere in the world, hidden from all people. No one was able to enter here if they did not have a special requirement, but let's focus on something else. There in the center of the cave, there were two eggs of light blue and green color. One of them shone brightly, while a human silhouette could be seen inside. An adult figure of a boy about 17 years old. Next to this was the other egg, much smaller than the other and broken. Although more than broken, it seemed that it was open from the inside. Inside the large egg, the figure began to move, more and more, until finally its eyes opened, revealing bright blue eyes that seemed colder than a glacier. They examined the place, calmly wondering what he was doing there, until suddenly their eyes opened wide, and memories of a great black beast that ruled the skies came to mind, a beast that killed thousands and hundreds of people in front of him, the Black Dragon. The boy began to scream and writhe inside the egg. Memories and traumas from his childhood thousands of years ago began to come to him, out of nowhere. His blue eyes turned red, a blood red so intense that it shone in that dark room, and finally, the egg broke. A heartbreaking scream was heard throughout the forest where that cave was hidden, of which no one knew. And there the egg opened, revealing a white-haired boy with red eyes that asked for revenge. Revenge towards that creature that killed his people and many more. But before he chose his destiny, a memory escaped him. The man, no, not just a man, but also a woman, a black-haired man and a golden-haired woman, his master and his queen. The queen of all her own, Arya. And her husband, the one who was crowned the strongest human in the world, the only one who wounded that calamity. The mercenary king, the sword champion, Albert Waldstein, his master. The white-haired man remembered that battle where he, along with the spirit of the wind and the mercenary king, fought against a black dragon. That fierce battle where the sword champion showed why he was the strongest human in the world by being the only one who wounded the black dragon, but still lost to that beast not only Albert but also his wife and the three perished before that black beast that reigned the skies with pride. Although the reality was different, he survived, and at that moment he remembered how and what his purpose for living was. Thousands of years ago. The large black dragon full of wounds on its body, small wounds but wounds nonetheless, although the most striking was the one on its left eye, where there was a horrible cut made by the person in front of it. The black-haired man, who was breathing heavily while holding his silver sword with great firmness, a beautiful sword that despite the hard battle against that powerful being remained unbroken, as if it refused to leave its bearer alone. The black-haired man also had thousands of wounds much worse than those of that dragon. The man knew it was very likely that he would die. Even if he won this battle he would die in the end, and also it was unlikely that he would win. Albert looked to his left where a golden-haired woman was on one knee breathing heavily as she was engulfed in a powerful golden tornado. The woman looked at him sadly and took his hand. Alberto also smiled sadly, knowing that this would be his end. Then they both looked back. There lying on the ground was a white-haired boy of about 17 years old, who was trying to crawl towards them with the little strength he had. His light blue armor was in pieces, and he had multiple wounds on his body, wounds that he tried to heal with a little ice that his hand generated. Albert smiled as he looked at the white-haired boy before saying his name. Albert Bell, smiling. The white-haired boy, now known as Bell, looked at his teacher scared. He knew it, he knew they couldn't win, and that the three of them would die before that calamity in front of them. Albert. Bell, please, looking at Arya. Arya. Take care of Aiz, smiling. Bell was alarmed when he saw that the beast was already preparing its claws to attack them, but was stopped by Albert and his silver sword, giving his wife time to go towards the white-haired man. Arya. Bell, stroking her cheek. Bell. Arya-sama. Alarmed, please leave here. Trying to move. Arya looked at him sadly before saying a few words quickly. Arya. Bell listens, looking at him. Bel looked at his queen, the most powerful woman among the spirits, those of his race, the only spirit who could control the wind and use it as she pleased without any limitations. Arya. We don't have much time left, shaking her head, that beast wants me, smiling sadly. Bel Arya-sama. She has to run, if the beast catches her she'll be imprisoned for eternity. Alarmed. Bel was terrified to see how his master and the strongest man in the world began to bend to the attacks of that beast. Arya also noticed it and put on a serious face, ready to give her last order. Arya. Bel, as your queen, I want to give you one last order, it would be. Bel knew that his queen would not accept leaving here and preferred to stay with her beloved to fight, so he listened carefully to her possible last order. Arya. Please take care of Aiz, she is in a deep sleep in the cryogenic cave to the north, in a cryogenic egg, she will wake up after thousands of years, possibly 13,000, smiling sadly. Ha. Bel looked behind Arya and was horrified to see Albert being impaled by a large black claw as his sword fell to the ground with a horrible crack in the middle of it. Arya. Please protect her. Bel was about to hug his queen to protect her from the imminent attack of the dragon that was already heading towards them, but a powerful wind prevented him from doing so. Bel Arya-sama. Looking at her. Before he could say anything more beautiful, he stood still as the powerful wind blew him far away and he could barely hear Arya's soft whispers. Arya. Take care of her. Arya-sama. At that moment, Bel's eyes barely managed to capture the figure of the woman who swore with her life to protect along with her husband. She will be caught between the dragon's jaws before it takes flight and completely ignores him, as if it knew she was going to die. Bel opened his eyes slowly and looked where he was, a forest that at first glance looked gloomy and dark, but for a spirit like him it looked beautiful and pleasant. The white-haired man quickly recognized it. It was the spiritual forest, a forest that as its name indicated only spirits could enter without getting lost in the great and thick darkness of the place. Bel clenched his fists and began to hit everything he found, venting his anger and hurting his battered body even more. He unleashed his anger by destroying trees with his broken sword. His beautiful white sword was now full of cracks, and half of it was simply destroyed, while the metal already looked rusty. All this a result of the battle against that beast. Bel unleashed his anger again and again, while his wounds worsened, and he lost blood at a terrifying speed. He blamed himself thousands of times. He continued like this until he remembered the last orders of his queen. Take care of Aiz. Aiz. A little golden-haired girl of 5 years old, half spirit and half human, she really resembled her mother, leaving the fact that her hair was slightly darker and it was completely straight unlike her mother's, which in the end was a little wavy. Bel opened his eyes before walking slowly towards an exact place, leaving half of his sword stuck in a tree. He continued walking until out of nowhere he knelt and fell to the ground. He couldn't move, he felt his strength leaving and little by little sleep consumed him. Frost. A powerful scream was heard from Bel, who used his own magic to slightly freeze his head and give him an intense headache that forced him to stay awake. He still couldn't sleep, he still couldn't rest, he had to get to Aiz. He got up with difficulty and walked as far as he could until he reached a strange cave. There between the leaves of some trees on the ground he saw a slight glow. Bel removed the leaves and moss revealing a completely black cave. Bel entered with ease before crossing a strange black portal that when he noticed that it was a spirit let him pass. Bel, seeing that he had permission to pass, entered and there he found a dark room next to 2 eggs, one green and one light blue. The green one was already being occupied by a small female silhouette that Bel easily recognized. Bel approached the green egg before placing a hand on it and looking sadly at the small silhouette. Bel. Forgive me, Aiz failed. Bel shed a tear before wiping it away and removing all of his destroyed weapons, leaving only his normal clothes. He went to the celestial egg and entered it with his knees pressed against his face, and finally the egg closed and froze, giving rise to a deep sleep that would last thousands of years. Currently. Bel opened his blue eyes again and looked at the place expressionlessly before looking at the egg next to him. From what he saw it was obvious that Aiz opened it from the inside, but where did he go, and worse still, how much time had passed since he opened it? It could have been years or decades. Bel was scared at that simple thought, and seeing his room without any wounds and completely healed at a terrifying speed, he shot out of the cave in search of signs of the little golden-haired girl he had to take care of. Aiz Tan. In a certain mansion in Orario, a red-haired goddess was running through the great halls of her mansion, the Twilight Mansion, looking for a golden-haired girl who didn't know how to do anything but cause trouble. Just like now. Loki immediately turned his gaze and sighed with relief as he saw Riveria walk next to Aiz holding her ear, while Aiz complained silently, knowing that it was better not to anger the high elf. Riveria. She tried to escape to the dungeon again, sighing. Loki. Thank goodness you found her, sighing. Finn. What's up, has he appeared yet? Serious. Riveria. Yes, she tried to go to the dungeon on her own again, sighing. Finn. I see, sighing, Aiz, you can't keep doing that, sooner or later your body will be destroyed if you train without rest and go to the dungeon, looking at her seriously. Aiz looked away annoyed, she had to become stronger to avenge her parents and kill that calamity. Aiz didn't remember some things from her past, but what she could remember perfectly was her mother and father, and she had slight vague memories of a white-haired boy who always trained with her father. She also remembered a conversation with her mother and father before they ever returned, was it when they left her in that egg? She didn't know exactly what it was, but they promised to come back for her if everything went well, which it didn't. They never returned and ended in a long sleep of thousands of years. She did not know stories exactly, and she did not know how she woke up or if someone took her out of there, but according to Riveria, while she, Finn and Gareth were exploring a strange forest with the Hermes family, they found her there, in a small meadow, while some wooden roots covered some parts of her body, as if protecting her. They took her out of there after much struggle and took her to Orario in secret, even hiding her from the Hermes family and from everyone. In the end they said that she was a daughter of 2 members who perished in the dungeon and consequently a member of the family. Since then Aiz is a member of the Loki family, she was trained by Finn and Riveria was in charge of her studies, also for some reason she was Loki's favorite, who kept saying that Aiz was special. 2 years after finding Aiz she officially became an adventurer at 7 years old. Just 1 year later something surprising happened when she went up to level 2, in just 1 year, Aiz simply broke all records by leveling up in a single year, something incredible without a doubt. And now at 12 years old she was level 4. Also known as Aiz Waldstein, the doll princess. Aiz blinked before looking at Riveria who looked worried. Riveria. You can't keep running away like this to go to the dungeon, much less considering the situation we're in, worried. True. The Dark Age, after the fall of the Zeus family and the Hera family who were in charge of keeping Evilus at bay, everything changed, and that could be easily noticed if you walked through the streets of Orario. You could barely see people walking, and all of them did so with fear and insecurity. Thanks to Evilus's constant attacks on normal people and adventurers. Right now it was even suicidal for an adventurer to go alone into the dungeon, since Evilus could corner him there and kill him easily. And things weren't much better thanks to that silver-haired woman. And the Loki family, along with the Ganesha family and the Astri family, were in charge of protecting Orario from the constant attacks by Evilus. Something Riveria reminded him of every time she gave him a long lecture about escaping to the dungeon. How now? Aiz looked bored at Riveria who was giving her a long 3-hour sermon. Aiz. It'll be a long 3 hours, sighing. Riveria. Don't sigh, hitting her head. Aiz. Lowering her head, this reminds me of that white-haired boy. I remember that whenever I misbehaved, he would give me a little hit on the head before starting to give me a lecture, but his weren't that long, sighing to herself, what was his name? I don't remember his name. I think it was. I wake up. Aiz's eyes widened and she turned towards a particular direction. The 2 members of the Loki family and their goddess looked at this confused. Aiz looked exalted and sweat began to run down her face, as if she had seen a ghost. Although they weren't far wrong, as Aiz felt as if a soft voice just like her mother's whispered those words to her. Aiz woke up. Riveria. Woke up. Woke up what? Confused. Loki. Are you okay there? Worried. Finn. What do you mean by woke up? Seriously. Aiz. No, I know, confused. Aiz looked out a window at the dark sky, implying that it was nighttime. A cold night. Aiz. I don't know. Bell was still looking for clues about Aiz's whereabouts in the forest. He seemed like someone looking for an extremely precious and valuable object that he accidentally lost. Despite the cold night, Bell was shirtless, enjoying the cold air hitting his chest as he searched for his goddaughter. He is an ice spirit. It is very difficult for a spirit to get sick, and it is literally impossible for him to get sick from something like a cough, flu or a cold. But leaving that aside, Bell watched with wide eyes the scene in front of him. There was a beautiful meadow there, but the interesting thing about it were the wood roots which had a shape as if they had wrapped themselves around something to protect it, something relatively small, or rather small. Aiz. Running. Bell ran straight towards the roots before examining them closely. Someone had cut the roots and taken Aiz, but why didn't the roots of the spirit forest protect Aiz? Is it because she's half spirit? No, despite that, she's still Arya's daughter, so it's impossible that they didn't protect her, then. The roots themselves decided that those who took Aiz out of there were not bad and allowed them to take her out. That was the most logical answer so far according to Bell. That was a good thing, because it meant that Aiz was in good hands, or at least that's what she thought, but that doesn't mean she shouldn't keep looking for her. She had to find her. If something were to happen to her, Bell could safely say that he would create an ice knife and stick it in her heart. No, that would be a very mild punishment. Bell gave a long sigh before looking up at the night sky. There was no trace of Aiz in the entire spirit forest, besides those routes where she had possibly been before. He had to extend his search area. And he decided to leave the forest by the main path without getting lost in that dense fog. Grrrrrrrrr. Bell stopped dead in his tracks before looking at a small, green, and very skinny monster, a creep, in simple words a goblin. Bell. Raising an eyebrow, how did you get here? Well, that doesn't matter. Playing it down. The goblin seemed to tremble with fear at Bell's mere presence. He might be a monster without intelligence, but he did have instinct, and his instincts weren't screaming at him to flee. Because they knew it wouldn't do any good against the person in front of him. Bell looked expressionlessly at the goblin, whom he had pierced with a single finger, as if it were a sword or a knife. The weak and fragile body of the goblin could do little or nothing against Bell's simple finger. Bell cleaned the goblin's blood with a little water that his hand generated before looking curiously at a city in the distance. Bell. Wasn't that there before, squinting, a monster village? No, those structures are very human, it must be just a normal village. Relaxing his expression, I'll go ask for directions and information, maybe I'll find something interesting. Walking, maybe my luck will help me. Unbeknownst to Bell, a certain bearded perverted god sensed his presence and opened his eyes wide. Zeus woke up. Who woke up, Grandpa? Zeus turned his gaze seeing a white-haired girl with red eyes, more or less around the age of 10. She looked innocent and pure in every word, and despite her age, she wore an elegant long dress with long sleeves to cover every part of her body, orders from her grandmother. In addition to this, she had long white hair to the middle of her back. At the same time as the little white-haired girl, a woman with sandy hair and a little old, just a little, but she still looked beautiful. The woman looked exalted and looked at Zeus with her eyes wide open. Hera. What was that? Alarmed. Zeus. Nothing you have to worry about, going back to washing the dishes. Hera. Ah. You felt that power that came from the spiritual forest, right? What if it's an enemy? We have no one to defend us, grabbing Zeus's collar. Zeus. You're scaring her. Hera blinked before noticing the little white-haired girl who had teary eyes while hugging a stuffed rabbit. Hera. My girl. Hugging her, don't cry, little one, don't worry, Grandma is here, hugging her lovingly. Zeus. Don't worry, Bellin, it's nothing you should worry about, just someone will come to visit us, an old friend, smiling. Bellin. But, wiping away tears. Zeus. You have nothing to worry about, smiling, he is a hero, looking at a silver sword. There on the wall hung a beautiful silver sword, a sword that belonged to a powerful swordsman. It had a hideous crack in the center, but it was still powerful without a doubt. Bellin. You a hero? With a sparkle in his eyes. Zeus. Haha, yes. A hero, one of the greats, smiling nostalgically. Hera. Don't tell me that he. Zeus. Oh no, he really died, but he left his legacy, not only his daughter Aiz, there is also his apprentice. Hera. Apprentice. Hera held her head and searched within her memories to see if the legendary mercenary king had an apprentice, and finally remembered. It was when the gods had not yet come down to the mortal himself, they could only refrain from seeing humans from afar. They were all weak, and very few could kill level 1 monsters, even the goblins were too much for them. But among those ordinary people, there were people who stood out completely, known as heroes. People with unique abilities, much more powerful than ordinary people, all of them were known as heroes, and even had their own legends and stories that little Bellin loved. Bellin. So, a hero is coming to visit us. Jumping for joy. Zeus. That's right. Raising his fist, come on, Bellin, help me make a good dinner, it'll probably arrive soon, smiling. Bellin hi. Going with his grandfather. Little Bellin left her rabbit and a book she was holding to help her grandfather. Hela was still in shock, processing the information until she saw the book that Bellin left on the table. Guardian of the Wind. A famous children's story besides Argonaut, both were equally famous among children, since many wanted to be like them. Argonaut, the famous hero who overcame thousands of obstacles and rescued the princess as well as defeated a monster that seemed impossible for anyone to defeat. Then there was the Guardian of the Wind, an equally famous tale that told the life of a young spirit who saw the death and destruction of his people, but managed to overcome it, also promising to protect his queen alongside the mercenary king. Basically Hera summed up the story and life of two of the greatest heroes that exist in a few words. But how was he alive? Even she thought she was dead, but it seemed that Zeus had something to do with it, or at least knew something about it. Hera was so deep in her thoughts that she didn't leave when Zeus and Bellin finished dinner. Zeus. Well, I think that when it arrives, I will go to greet him, going to the main door. Hera swallowed hard, she didn't know if it was really who she thought it was, but whoever it was, he was powerful. And while Hera was wandering in her thoughts, she calmly left her humble playroom before sitting on a wooden bench that was there. It wasn't long before a white-haired boy with his clothes half destroyed, who looked lost, entered his vision. Zeus. I've been waiting for you, boy, smiling. L looked at him for a few seconds before putting himself on guard. L. Who are you, old man? Squinting. Zeus. Calm, raising his hands, I suppose you are alert because of my aura. L. What are you? You're not human, seriously. Zeus. Jojo, that's right. I'm not human, but I'll explain everything to you in due time. Now, do you want to come in? I have some food, and it looks like you need to replenish your energy, smiling. L looked at him for a second before nodding and walking behind the god, although he didn't know he was a god, but he did know that he would give him all or almost all the answers he needed. L entered the small but humble mackerel and looked at it with curiosity, taking into account the aura of power that Zeus emanated. He thought he would live in a much better lodger, but he didn't complain, it had that unique homey touch that Belle liked. Although he was confused to see a little girl look at him in shock and with a sparkle in her eyes, before looking at an open problem she had in her hands and back at him. L. Looks like a rabbit, funny. L didn't know what happened, from one second to the next the girl was standing in front of him, and from the next the girl looked like a tick holding tightly to his leg. L. Expressionless. Zeus. Oh, excuse her, she's my granddaughter, smiling, she loves stories about heroes, and when I see her favorite hero, I can't help it, fun. L. Hero. Confused. Zeus. Right, Sapinhaku doesn't know about that either. I'll explain everything to you. Bellin, you can go with your grandmother and prepare everything to eat, smiling. Bellin D right away. Excited. The little Bellin ran to the kitchen excitedly, she had just met one of the greatest heroes in history, and also her favorite. His innocent mind gave him no reason to distrust his grandfather, so he immediately thought it was really him, although he was not wrong. Zeus. Let's go, walking, what do you want to know? Smiling. L. I guess the first thing would be what year is it? You know me, so how long has it been since I woke up? And most importantly, do you know Aiz Waldstein? Seriously. Zeus. This is going to be a long story, sighing, get comfortable, this is going to be a long story. Things of the past, 02. In a certain cabin in a place far from Orario you could see a white-haired man sitting on a wooden chair outside the cabin while looking at the blue sky. His gaze was blank as he stared at the silver sword in his lap. A beautiful sword that had a horrible crack in the middle of it, it seemed like it was about to break, or so it seemed at first glance, since if a high-class adventurer hit the sword, it was more likely that the adventurer's bones would break instead of the sword. That's how powerful that sword was. Just like its former wearer. L was thinking very deeply without moving even an inch. Much to the discomfort of a certain sandy-haired woman who was watching him from a window in the cabin. Hera. I don't know if he's moved in 6 hours, is he even alive? Looking at Zeus. Zeus. He's just processing the information, calm, what did you expect? He's been practically disconnected from the world for 13,000 years, all the events that haven't or happening were too much, even for him, looking at Belle, even worse, he's still processing the information of his master's deaths, looking at Hera's breasts. Hera. I see, thinking. The white-haired girl came running into the room and looked unusually excited. Ellen. Where is Mr. Hero? Looking around. Zeus. He's out enjoying nature, you can go and talk to him if you want, just don't be so energetic, perverted laugh. Ellen okay. Smiling, and why are you looking at Grandma's chest, tilting her head. Hera reacted to that comment and looked at Zeus who was still looking at her breasts with a perverted look similar to that of a certain white-haired Sanin. Hera. What are you doing in front of the girl? Hitting him. Zeus ugh. KO. Ellen. Ticking his head. Hera. Forget this, looking at Bellin while hitting Zeus, go play with Mr. Hero, sighing, and please remember to bring apples to make a pie. Ellen. Okay. Smiling. Ellen left the room leaving his grandmother to hit his grandfather and ran towards the exit of the mackerel to go with Mr. Hero, but not before grabbing a basket of apples. Bell remained motionless as he looked at his mentor's sword. While his eyes looked at that sword with nostalgia, his mind was wandering as he thought about the words of the man who had recently revealed himself as Zeus himself. Not only that, he had revealed several things to him, the arrival of the gods to the world, the age of monsters, the age of heroes, and finally the current age, the Dark Age. L gave a slight snort. He knew that humans were stupid beings, and the truth was that it didn't surprise him that they sought their own destruction. They were beings who only sought power and knowledge for themselves. He knew that they didn't mind giving anything in order to have their long-awaited power. Humans were the most vile beings in the world in his opinion. Most humans do not coexist with nature, they destroy it, they are greedy and believe themselves to be the kings of the world, and they are not even capable of living among themselves. If there is someone powerful, humans will immediately kneel before him, just for the simple fact of having power, although of course, they would not miss the opportunity to assassinate him if that opportunity presented itself. Lies, deception, slavery, rape, fraud, massacres, genocide, suicide, homicide, physical and mental torture, extortion, kidnapping, betrayal, etc. Those were just some of the many things that human beings had done against their own race. And in thousands of years it had not changed at all, on the contrary, it seemed that they had formed new ways to do evil. And where did that take them? To the Dark Ages. Bell thought that with the arrival of the gods this could change. What an idiot he was. The gods were beings just as stupid as humans. It made sense in a way, humans were created in the image of God, and they brought out the worst in the gods, their greed. Bell felt ashamed that his race had also been created by beings as greedy as the gods. But at the same time he felt proud, after all, despite being created by the gods, the spirits were beings who lived in peace and harmony, without harming nature. In fact, it seemed that nature itself loved them, and that is why the spiritual forest exists. Nature created that forest because she wanted to give a comfortable place to the spirits that she loved so much and that cared for her so much. Obviously the spirits knew how to fight, although they were peaceful beings they were not the only beings, there were monsters like the black dragon that only sought destruction to everything that walked or moved. And to protect their race and even others the spirits had to learn to fight and use their magic to attack instead of defend. But even the races that they protected betrayed them. An example were the elves who were jealous of their magic and murdered some spirits in cold blood just to obtain this knowledge, although it was not very useful, since the elves had to do rituals for several decades to be able to use magic and it was very weak, unlike that of the spirits who since they were babies, were able to use their magic enough to be able to do what an elf would do in 100 years. And while the elves had a certain longevity, the spirits had much more of this. But despite that, at least the elves were better than humans in one sense, and that is that they took care of nature. But still Bell did not have a great appreciation for them. One race that did have some respect from Bell were the Beast Men, although they were also greedy beings who desired power, there was something special about them, and that was one thing. Family comes first. That was an unwritten rule that the Beast Men had. One that Bell respected. The Beast Man could give his own arm or any part of his body for power, but they would never dare to give a member of his family, and if a member of his family was in danger, all the Beast Men would be there to help him, at least they were loyal to themselves, no matter what kind of animal they were, half cat, half dog, half bear, etc. It didn't matter, the Beast Men got along well with each other. I couldn't say the same about humans, worse still, the Amazons. These beings were the ones Bell most repudiated, or at least the ones he liked the least. Although gods could now top that list, according to what he heard from the old pervert, there were certain gods who were doing evil by proxy right now. And they were leading the humans to fight each other again. Bell sighed again, why wasn't this surprising, at least there was a family in charge of maintaining order, a goddess who had begun to earn Bell's respect, was the goddess Astrea, of course, when Zeus began to talk about how beautiful she was and her good proportions he earned a double blow from Bell and Hera. And he and Hera got along terribly. Except when they punished Zeus for doing something perverted, there it seemed that both joined forces to punish him. Bell wondered who the hell was the crazy guy who let Zeus have a girl in his care. He would say that with Hera she was better off, but that was a lie. If she were with Zeus, she would become a pervert or worse, and if it were with Hera, she would be arrogant and a tyrant. At least being with both there is some order, and honestly the girl liked him. She had a great aura of purity and peace that made Bell's heart shudder. Not even a spirit had such a clean and pure soul. She looked a lot like Arya, only Arya had an image of respect and admiration, while the girl had an adorable and tender image. Her rabbit appearance didn't help much. Although it was a little annoying. He kept asking questions about his past and so on. Every time he told her something about his fights against enemies or monsters, the girl's eyes shone like little stars as she listened attentively. For Bellin, it was much better to hear the great heroic acts and adventures from the mouth of the hero who lived them than from a story. Although Zeus was a little depressed because now Bellin no longer looked for him to read him hero stories, instead he spent his time behind Mr. Hero, asking him to tell him one of his stories. Something curious according to Bell was the physical resemblance that both had. Literally the girl was a carbon copy of him, but in her feminine and smaller version, there was also the similarity in the names. And speaking of the devil. Bell turned his gaze slightly to see a small white-haired girl running out of the cabin, to finally arrive right next to him and jump up and down excitedly. Bellin. Tell me another one of your stories. Happy. Bell gave a slight sigh at the energetic girl. Did she have a battery with infinite energy inside her? She was too energetic and too curious. Of course she was also very shy. At first when she arrived at the cabin the girl stuttered and looked extremely nervous in her presence. After gaining her confidence, her shyness had decreased considerably and now she spent her time behind him like a stalker, waiting for the perfect moment to ask him to tell one of his stories. And he didn't really have anything interesting to do, besides talking about those stories made him very nostalgic, so he told them to the little girl. L. Very well, closing his eyes. L removed the sword from his lap and sheathed it before leaving it on the grass leaning against a chair. Ellen smiled happily before climbing onto the chair and sitting on Belle's lap, then opening a sky blue book she was holding. L. I feel like I'm his father, stick face. Ellen. Here. Pointing to a part of the book. Elle looked at the part of the book that Bellin pointed at with curiosity. Ellen. It says here that you once fought an Amazon woman named L.E.G.A.D.O. Is that true? With a twinkle in his eye. L. Evald. Oh yeah, the stupid Amazon. Ellen A. L. Forget that last bit, the book basically says a summary, right? Ellen hi. L. Then let me tell you the whole story, looking at the sky, that was a long time ago. Flashback. Thousands of years ago. In a large field of flowers you could see 3 highly recognized people at that time. Leading the team was Albert Waldstein, with his typical light armor, his red scarf and his silver sword in its sheath. Albert had a calm expression as he looked in front of him. Next to him was a beautiful woman with golden hair with an expression that reflected an incredible calm despite the situation they were in. She wore a white dress with some parts covered in metal to give it more protection. Finally behind both of them was our protagonist. The young man with messy white hair the same way as his mentor, he wore completely white clothes and on top of this, he wore a sky blue full body armor. Despite being a full suit of armor, it didn't look too cumbersome. It was made to be flexible and give great mobility to its user. In addition, the armor wore a mask of ice. How it didn't melt was a mystery. But that demon-like ice mask was only giving him a more intimidating appearance. Unlike the woman and man in front of him, Bell had his sword drawn, while his eyes shone in intense sky blue. In front of them was a large army of Amazons. Like any Amazon they wore revealing clothes that barely covered what was necessary, and in front of them all was a woman with sandy hair and the same eyes, a good body full of scars from all the hard battles she has had throughout her life, and a mocking smile could not be missing on her face. That was L.E.G.A.D.O, the Empress of the Amazons. L.E.G.A.D.O. I already told you, Albert, if you want me to join you in fighting that super developed lizard, you'll have to fight all my Amazons and me. Licking her lips, of course, if you lose I think you can work to give me good offspring. That was all. Bell broke into a cold sweat when he saw his queen smile sweetly, while a large golden wind began to swirl around the 3 of them, more precisely around Albert. Arya Bell. Bell. Shaking, H high. Arya. Give me a rapier. Albert Bell. Sweating shaking. Bell began to create an ice rapier and gave it to his queen who immediately grabbed it and prepared to go and impale that dirty harpy at her word. But before Arya could commit genocide, she was stopped by Albert, who was making an inhuman effort to stop her. He could be the strongest man, but no one wanted to face an angry woman. Albert looked at his options while holding back a furious Arya. If I fought I didn't know what the outcome could be. The Amazon exercise was incredibly large, and although he was more powerful than any of the Amazons including L.E.G.A.D.O, that did not mean that they were not too many. Besides that he did not want to kill any of them, because he could not go with his 100%, and probably when he had defeated all the Amazons L.E.G.A.D.O would join the fight, and being tired, that means that he and L.E.G.A.D.O would be equal in power, he had a 50-50th chance. So he went for his safest option. Albert. What if I change things? Seriously? L.E.G.A.D.O. Ah. Raising an eyebrow. Albert. I'm not going to fight, my pupil will, pointing to Bell, he will fight with confidence. Everyone stared at Albert with slightly wide eyes, including Bell. Had his master gone mad? Bell wasn't nearly as powerful as Albert and he wanted him to take on an entire army. Albert. But, raising his finger, he'll fight only against you, pointing at L.E.G.A.D.O, what do you think? Smiling. L.E.G.A.D.O narrowed her eyes. L.E.G.A.D.O, what's the trick? It would be. Albert. None, the rewards remain the same, if I lose I'm yours. Arya growled. Albert. But if I win you will come with us and help fight the Black Dragon, seriously. L.E.G.A.D.O. A one-on-one fight against a brat. Ha. Okay, that kid may be your pupil, but he's not as powerful as you. This will be easy, cracking her neck. Elle looked at his teacher for answers. Albert. Calm down Bell, I know you can do it, smiling confidently. Elle. I don't believe it. With a twitch in his eye, if I lose, it's not my fault. Albert. Please don't lose, noticing how Arya glared at him. Elle sighed before removing his mask, revealing his face to the public. Imelda blushed slightly at the sight before shaking her head and gritting her teeth. Imelda. Don't think that just because you're a cute boy I'll have mercy on you. Blushing. Elle raised an eyebrow and sighed, that's why he didn't like taking off his mask, it wasn't his fault he was so beautiful and hexy, even among spirits he was considered one of the most handsome before the massacre by the Black Dragon. But leaving that aside. Elle stood right in front of Arya and Albert while Imelda stood in front of him just a few meters away, the Amazon raised her fists right in front of his face, she was going to fight barehanded. And Bell. He raised his sword right in front of his face and gripped the hilt with both hands ready to fight. He wasn't stupid, much less proud, he wasn't going to fight hand to hand against Imelda just to make this fight fair, he was going to go all out and use everything in his favor to win. Imelda snorted but said nothing, for her he was still a child in training. They both stared at each other, Belle's light blue eyes looked into Imelda's sandy eyes, and finally. Elle made the first move. At a high speed that took Imelda by surprise. Elle closed the distance in seconds and planted his foot firmly in the grass before directing the edge of his sword towards Imelda's neck. Imelda reacted immediately and with the back of her hand blocked Belle's cut. Elle narrowed his eyes at the sight of light gloves made of metal against swords that reached up to his elbow, then he looked at his legs that also had light boots made to block weapons. Imelda gave a challenging smile as she felt Belle's strength, when their respective weapons collided she felt her arms go slightly numb, she had to admit it, she was strong, but she wasn't the Empress of the Amazons for nothing. Elle tilted his head to the right when he saw Imelda's right fist heading towards his face. But her eyes widened slightly as she felt her cheek being cut lightly, leaving a thin line of blood. Imelda. You're agile, child, smiling. Elle growled slightly before attempting to knee Imelda, who blocked it with her own knee. But he didn't expect Belle to smile out of nowhere before spitting out a thin line of saliva from his mouth that instantly froze, resulting in an ice needle that went right to his forehead. Imelda arched her body and head as much as she could, letting the ice needle pass right above her. But when she returned to her normal position she was received by a strong blow to the face, courtesy of Belle's left fist, who did not feel the slightest remorse for hitting one of the creatures he hated. The blow forced Imelda to step back a couple of meters before looking angrily at Belle, that blow had hurt much more than before, but calm. Imelda opened her eyes when she saw Belle raise his left fist, not only did he have a metal glove, but it was covered by a thin layer of hard ice, he had reinforced the armor with his magic. Imelda clicked her tongue. That's why he hated spirits, they were beings with great combat power, and to make matters worse, they had their magic, which they controlled in a terrifying way. Imelda gritted her teeth before launching herself at Belle to give him a strong blow to the face, or so it seemed. Since when he was right in front of Belle he slid on the ground, surprising Belle who was already ready to block his attack. Already on the ground, Imelda kicked Belle in the left calf. Belle's armor could not withstand that blow, and the part that Imelda kicked ended up breaking in heavy. El intento de una estacada Imelda la cul segura en el suelo, pero este puso sus brazos enfrente de ella para cubrirla, y gracias a los guantes ligeros, la espada no logró atravesar su defensa. Of course Imelda didn't know, she expected her defense to be easily broken by a kick from Belle, and before she could defend herself again, Belle kicked her again with the same foot to the chin. Imelda spat out a bit of saliva but immediately recovered and with both hands grabbed the right foot of a surprised Belle before she began to squeeze it with great force. Belle grunted and endured the intense pain in his leg as he raised his sword above his head and brought it down at high speed to split the Amazon's head in two. Imelda let go of Belle's foot and covered herself with her left arm to deflect the attack, and just as Belle's sword buried itself in the grass, Imelda was already extending her fist towards Belle's chest, who concentrated his ice magic to reinforce the armor but… Shit. I'm not going to be able to freeze her, I'll have to take her head on. Gritting his teeth. Just as Imelda flattened it, her fist hit Belle's celestial armor, cracking it horribly until the breastplate finally broke. Belle's eyes widened before spitting out a bit of blood. How could he have such inhuman strength? Only his master had strength equal to or greater than that. But Belle couldn't think too long when Imelda grabbed him by the neck of the armor and gave him a powerful punch to the cheek. Imelda. This is for what happened earlier. Smiling fiercely. Belle was sent flying and landed a few meters in front of Albert and Arya. Arya was about to go and help him if Albert hadn't stopped her. Albert. Calm down, this isn't over yet. Arya. But Belle. Albert. Believe me, he would rather lose than have someone save him 1,000 times, besides, he can still fight, smiling slightly. Arya watched worriedly as Belle slowly got up from the ground before spitting out some saliva mixed with blood. Belle. It's no use to me anymore, taking off his gloves. Imelda. What the hell are you doing? Raising an eyebrow. Belle began to remove his armor, leaving him only in his tight white clothes. Evelda blushed and licked her lips when she saw Belle's well-defined body. He might be a brat, but she wouldn't mind having children with him. Belle cracked his neck before staring at Evelda, who noticed a slight change. Evelda. It's strange, I feel like I'm in front of someone else. His posture is different, he's freer, he looks more serious, and his face looks more like a man's silly smile. Belle clicked his tongue as he saw Evelda's lascivious eyes undress him and eat him out with her eyes. It didn't help that she was flirtatiously licking her lips. Belle was about to grab his sword from its sheath until he realized something. Belle? Shit. Evelda. Are you looking for this, bunny? Flirty. Evelda raised her right hand showing a celestial sword, the sword of Belle. Belle got into a fighting stance. Without his sword his chances of winning were considerably reduced, but he still had several tricks up his sleeve. Evelda smiled as she saw Belle ready to fight her hand to hand. Evelda threw the sword towards her Amazons, who caught it and kept it until the fight was over. Now Belle definitely lost his weapon. This time Evald was the first to advance and launched herself at Belle, preparing to kick him in the chest. Belle used both hands to stop and hold Evelda's kick, which tried to get out of Belle's grip, mainly because she was starting to feel like her leg was freezing. But before he could get away, Belle swept Evelda with his right leg. With her balance lost, Evelda fell to the ground but managed to react immediately to avoid a blow covered in hard frost from Belle. Belle didn't stop there. At high speed he created an ice staff, although at the end the tip of it was pointed, a simple but effective spear. Belle launched a flurry of thrusts at Evelda, who dodged or blocked with her gloves as best she could. She remained lying on the ground, so she had the disadvantage. When Belle was about to give the final blow, Evald surprised him when she wrapped her legs around the spear, holding it firmly and then pulling it. Belle tightened his grip on the spear, but his strength wasn't enough, and he ended up being pulled along with the spear by Evelda. Belle? Shit. Punch. L.E.G.A.D O. Spitting saliva. Evelda smiled as she managed to connect a clean punch to Belle's stomach, but her smile didn't last long as the saliva Belle spat out suddenly froze into several ice needles that dug deep into Evelda's right shoulder. She growled in annoyance. Evelda tried to hit Belle in the air, but Belle managed to move to the right and dodge the blow. Evelda quickly got up from the ground and tried to hit Belle with a great flurry of blows. Blows that were being frantically dodged by Belle, who felt sweat running down his forehead every time he dodged one of Evelda's powerful blows. Evelda tried to knee her in the stomach, but Belle dodged it by bending her body forward and then sliding to the right to dodge a punch from Evelda. But it didn't end there when out of nowhere, she had to jump to dodge a foot sweep from Evelda. Evelda, still on the ground, tried to kick Belle in the air, but her eyes opened wide when Belle grabbed her foot in the air and used it to balance and make a great jump to get away from her. Evelda tore out the ice needles embedded in her right shoulder and threw them at Belle like darts at high speed. Belle tilted his head to let 2 of the needles pass, then moved his arm back and his body to the left to dodge another 4 needles that were going towards his arm and right shoulder, and finally jumped to the right to evade 3 ice needles that were going to some of the vital points on his body. Belle opened his eyes when he felt Evelda's presence behind him, and by pure instinct, he leaned forward, letting a roundhouse kick pass over his head. When he felt that Evelda was preparing to give him a flurry of punches, Belle put both hands on the ground and used them as supports to lift his legs off the ground and try to kick Evelda in the chin. NT. Something like a kangaroo, but instead of a tail he is using his hands. Evelda managed to dodge the blow by a hair and took several steps back to get away from Belle, who had already gotten back on his feet. Evelda gritted her teeth at Belle's calm expression, as if dodging her was no big deal. Evelda. I'm going to destroy you, damn it. Angry. Evelda rushed towards Belle and sent a barrage of blows that a normal person couldn't dodge. Too bad Belle wasn't normal. He threw a punch at Belle's arm and kneed his stomach, then swept him on the feet and finally tried to hook him in the chin. All failure. Belle dodged each and every one of Evelda's attacks. While staring into her eyes, studying her, no. Evelda. Are you seeing right through me? Evelda tried to jump a punch to Belle's face, but Belle leaned back and the punch landed right in front of him, inches away from hitting him. Taking advantage of Belle's awkward position, Evelda tried to sweep her feet and almost succeeded if it weren't for Belle seeing her out of the corner of his eye and jumping slightly, staying in the air. Just at that moment when Evelda's leg was passing under Belle's, Evelda threw a punch with her right fist at Belle. She wasn't going to be able to dodge it while in the air, much less after having dodged another attack. Or so Evelda thought. Evelda's eyes widened as Belle lowered his head in the air and let his body spin like a log as both her kick and punch passed him by. Evelda was getting angrier and angrier. How the hell could she dodge in that inhuman way? Not even she is capable of dodging in that way, and with such ease. What angered her the most was that Belle wasn't blocking or deflecting her attacks, he was directly evading them, and that infuriated her. But before Evelda could shout 1,001 things at Belle, she froze, finally falling into Belle's arms, who had already recovered from the double attack that Evelda tried to give him. L. Finally, sighing tiredly. Albert, who was watching the fight closely from beginning to end, smiled when he saw something on Evelda's back. An ice needle covered in a suspicious transparent liquid responsible for Evelda falling asleep. It was a modified aphrodisiac. It didn't increase your sexual desire or your sexual performance. No, this aphrodisiac only gave you the after effects of a normal aphrodisiac after its effect wore off. What were those after effects? Eye exhaustion, a lot of sleepiness, muscle weakness, a slight burning sensation in the body, and a slight but constant fever. Those were the side effects you had after using a normal aphrodisiac, and this modified aphrodisiac was specifically to give you those effects. L looked at Evelda with annoyance, but resigned himself and carried Evelda bridal style. NT. Basically like a princess for the people at Cranel. And he walked towards his mentor and his queen, while showing the Amazons Evelda as if she were a trophy. L. My sword. Looking at an Amazon with grass-green hair and grey eyes. The Amazon immediately reacted and nervously went to pick up Belle's sword before going and giving it to him with a shaky step. L. How strange, a second ago they looked more like berserk and now they look very submissive, strange. L was surprised when the Amazon knelt before him like a knight and extended her sword with both hands, as if it were a sacred object. L simply took his sword and put it in its sheath as he watched the Amazon leave at a quick pace before she, along with a group of other Amazons, formed up in front of Evelda waiting orders. No, not from Evelda, from him. L began to sweat from nerves when he saw all the Amazons looking at him expectantly. L didn't know what to do and he didn't know the reason for this until Albert patted him on the back in a friendly way while smiling nervously and Arya continued to glare at him for much less than before. Albert. You see, Belle, let's just say I remembered that when a single man has a one-on-one battle against an Amazon, according to tradition, he has to get married and have offspring as soon as possible, scratching his neck. L remained silent as he looked at his mentor with a blank expression. L. Can I refuse? Albert. Oh, of course, sweating nervously. L. So I don't have to do that tradition, sighing in relief. Albert. The thing is that to refuse you must leave that Amazon on the battlefield where you defeated her and you caught her and carried her in your arms, basically it's as if you had gladly accepted the commitment, looking scared at Arya. L was speechless at that. Was that the reason why the Amazons were now so submissive? L trembled slightly when he felt the woman he was holding begin to move and lift her hand to touch his cheek. Evelda. That's right, flirty, you won the bet, Albert, my husband and I will go with you to fight that thing, cuddling up to Belle. L. Shit. And flashback. L. And that was Evelda, calm. Ellen. So you and Evelda got married. Looking at him with the book in her hands. L. Basically yes, if there's something that spirits respect, it's traditions, and I inadvertently accepted the commitment, so I had to respect it, sighing, although it was a pain in the ass putting up with Evelda when she was pregnant, snorting. Ellen. Sugoi, with a twinkle in his eyes, when I grow up, I'd also like to marry my hero. With a twinkle in his eyes, we'll have a fated meeting. Crossing his arms, and he'll save me from all evil, smiling with confidence. Without a doubt that was a beautiful and wonderful dream that any child of his age would have. It's a shame Belle could be so insensitive sometimes. L. That's it, the stupidest dream I've ever heard, Chibi. L. Blank. L. There are no people who love you with all their heart just because if after having saved you, I believe you about a predestined meeting, but love is born slowly and grows, it is not born just like that from one day to the next, calm, a person who loves you for your strength or your beauty only has false love for you, looking at two blue birds fighting over a yellow bow tie. Ellen. B. But the story says you and Evelda lived happily married. And your love was born overnight, trembling slightly. L. Ah. That's a farce, well more or less, at first Evelda and I hated each other, our relationship was a disaster, but over time we got used to each other's ways and gave each other a chance, love was born and more corny stuff that I don't want to tell, boring, but the point is that our love wasn't born overnight, she and I created our story and lived happily in the end, smiling slightly, and with so many children, smiling bitterly. Ellen. So hero tales are a farce, with teary eyes. L. Shit. And not like you think, smiling nervously, it's just that the hero books don't tell the whole story, I assure you that all those heroes are real, also their relationships with their loved ones, it's just that the stories don't tell in detail how their relationship began, let's just say it's something more intimate, okay? Smiling. Ellen. Sniff high. Wiping away tears. L. Okay, let's go back to the cabin. I smell something delicious and I'm hungry, carrying Bellin and getting up. Belle started walking towards the cabin with Bellin in his arms until Bellin remembered something. Bellin. The apples. Holding her head in fear. Belle. Don't worry, here they are carrying a basket of apples. Bellin but. Belle. Girl, I'm too fast for your eye, calm. Ellen was surprised. He had picked them up while she was reading the story to him. How much speed must it take for him to do that without her noticing? She didn't even feel Belle take her off her lap. No doubt. For Belle, it was great to be with a hero. And that was said by her smile from ear to ear, not only for being with one of the heroes she liked the most and longed to meet, but because for some time now she had been feeling that something was missing. She felt a certain emptiness when she saw children playing with their parents every time she and her grandfather went to a nearby town to buy things. She wondered what it would feel like to have a father and a mother. And finally, she was feeling that warm feeling that she longed to have. She saw in Belle the figure of a father. That Belle had white hair like her only made her affection towards him, and his figure as a father increase. Without a doubt this had been a good day for Belle and Cranel, and in the future, he would also know the love of a mother, thanks to a certain silver-haired girl who was a relative of his, although of course, she didn't know that. Orario, 03. You can see a white-haired boy with blue eyes and approximately 17 years old sitting in a carriage next to a little white-haired girl with red eyes, who looked slightly depressed about the death of her grandparents. They were both going to a particular place. Schedule. The labyrinth city that was currently facing one of its worst times. Wait. Schedule. Death of grandparents. By the way, let me tell you what happened to get to this situation. It had been 2 months since the death of her grandparents where they fell down a dangerous cliff that led to a place full of monsters that escaped from the dungeon. She had not seen it, but according to the farmers and other people who managed to witness the scene, both fell down that cliff. No one could go to rescue them since the place was infested with monsters. Unfortunately, Belle was somewhere else outside the cabin, investigating in the cave where he slept for thousands of years. Although this was only an excuse for Zeus and Hera's plan to work, both gods did not have much time left, and soon they would have to return to the Tenkai, so they convinced Belle to help in this plan to fake his death, along with another god who gave Belle a bad feeling, someone Belle named Idiot Helper. The blue-haired girl who was next to him laughed a little at the name. After faking the death of both gods, Belle returned to the cabin a few hours after having given the message to Bellen, who tearfully begged him to go rescue them. That was not part of the plan, but Belle's will wavered before Bellen's tearful face, and he accepted. He went down to the cliff and with terrifying skill with the cracked and rusty sword he eliminated each and every one of the monsters, leaving the place empty and full of monster stones. Belle took out of a backpack that had 2 pairs of clothes, one for women and one for men, the clothes that Zeus and Hera usually wore. He tore them apart and stained them a little with blood and kept some of the pieces with him, while the others simply froze them and tore them apart. Belle returned to the cabin and gave the bloody pieces of cloth to Bellen, who could not believe what her eyes saw. They had died. Her grandparents had really died. She wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. She wanted someone to hold her and comfort her. So he clung tightly to the first person in front of him and let it all out. Belle was really uncomfortable because Bellen was hugging him tightly while crying her eyes out. He didn't know what to do, so after a few seconds, he just knelt down and hugged her mentally, blaming the 2 gods who pretended to be his grandparents for leaving this part to him. At least the girl didn't hate him for being late. Days later, Bellen was still depressed and barely ate, even if the food was made by Belle and had an incredible seasoning. She barely ate. Belle told Bellen the idea of going to Orario and handing her over to be an adventurer, but she rejected the idea, not wanting to leave the place where her grandparents raised her. Belle thought for several days until he came up with an idea, and unfortunately he contacted the idiot assistant. Hermes. Belle kun, smiling, I didn't expect you to actually contact me. Tell me, what do you need, great guardian of the wind, smiling. Belle. Stop messing around, idiot helper, annoyed. Listen, I tried to convince Bellen to go to Orario, but he refuses because he doesn't want to leave the home where he lived with Hera and Zeus, serious, and trying to tell stories of things for several days, but he still refuses, so I need your help. Looking at him, Hera has already returned to heaven, hasn't she? Hermes. Hi, just yesterday she returned to heaven. She asked me to tell you that if you did not take care of the legacy of her precious soul, you would be tortured for millennia when your soul went to the Tenkai, smiling nervously. Belle. And Zeus. Serious. Hermes. Oh, well, he's still here, but he'll be leaving in a day or 2. He said he had something important to do. Looking at him. Belle. Okay, I want you to go to that perverted bearded guy and tell him to keep a diary, seriously. Hermes. A diary. Curious, I understand, you plan to make him write that he and Hera wished for her to go to Orario to become a hero and a strong adventurer, smiling. Belle. Yes, expressionless. Hermes. Well, that will be easy to ask, smiling, and I think Zeus will help immediately. Well, if you excuse me, I will go make the request. Getting up from the chair, come on, we have work to do. Looking behind him. Asfi. Looking at Belle, why? Belle. Why, what? Confused. Asfi. Why do you listen to them? Why take a girl to such a terrible place, shaking her head, why go there when you can live a quiet life here, staring at him. L. To be strong. Asfi. Just that, annoyed. L. No, to look for someone, remembering a little golden-haired girl, to return the kindness of two people who took me in and taught me everything they knew. I have to take care of their legacy, their little one. She's still alive, I'm sure of that, so it's not too late to return the favor, but I also can't leave Belen alone, she has no one to take care of her. And if I leave her with one of the villagers here sooner or later in a few years, Belen will decide to go to Orario alone, and that would be dangerous, so it's better if I take her with me and train her, seriously. Asfi. How do you plan to take care of her if you are just a villager, would be. L. Confused, I see, they haven't told you anything, huh, looking at her. Asfi. What do you mean? Confused. L. You'll understand in time, closing his eyes. Asfi. Whatever, leaving. Well, that's how all this happened, and now, 2 weeks after having delivered that false diary and Zeus returned to the Tenkai Bell, and Belen had undertaken a short trip with a chariot given by the god Hermes to go to Orario. Belen was nervous, she had heard things about Orario and knew that they were in what was probably their worst moment, but again, she turned to look at her father figure, and the doubt disappeared from her eyes, changed by a strong confidence. She knew that Mr. Hero, whom she had decided to call Belladison a long time ago, would protect her. In addition, she was sure that there would be no one in the Labyrinth City who could defeat the incredible Mr. Hero, or at least that's what she thought, although her thoughts were not wrong. After a few minutes the cart arrived at the large Orario walls that had left Belen fascinated. At the entrance to the Orario you could see 4 guards with identical armor and an emblem that Bell didn't know, but he had the idea that it was the emblem of his family and his god. The place was empty, and in fact, it seemed that the people inside were looking for a way to get out of there without getting into trouble. Little by little the white-haired duo approached the entrance while Bell grabbed Belen's hand. Both wore long brown cloaks covering their bodies, underneath they wore completely normal clothes. Well, Bell also wore the cracked sword that had previously belonged to his master. After walking for a moment they were stopped by both guards who looked extremely alert. Guard. Identify yourself, seriously. L. Hello, I'm bellcranel. Guard. Reason for entry and profession. Looking at him. L. I am a former farmer, I lived in a village not far from here, the one to the north. We had some problems, and my daughter and I came to Orario, putting a hand on Belen's shoulder. L didn't know it, but Belen was giving a radiant smile at the words. Me and my daughter. He may have been sad about what happened to his grandparents, but he definitely remembered this day as one of the best of his life. Guard. Are you aware of the situation at Orario? Surprised. L. Yes. Guard. And yet, you really want to enter, hesitating. L. It's our best option for now, looking at it. Guard. Okay, we'll check your luggage to make sure you're not members of Evilis or some Rakia infiltrator. L. Hi, nodding. 2 guards quickly approached and took his luggage to inspect it for a few minutes before nodding and walking towards their boss. Guard 3. They are clean. Guard. Okay, now could you please take off your hood, Mr. Cranel? Looking at him. L. Hi, sighing. L took off his brown hood, and to his bad luck, as soon as he did so the guards immediately saw the sword hanging from his waist and were on guard. Guard. And that sword, seriously. L. It's mine, looking at him like he's an idiot. Guard. Don't be funny, pointing a spear at him, what's the weapon for, serious? L. What do you use a gun for? Squinting. Guard. You're a member of Evilis. Squinting. L. It's not like that, serious. Guard. The girl is kidnapped, lifting the track. L. I already told you it's not like that, seriously. Guard. You're lie. Attacking him. Slash. The guard stopped dead in his tracks and blinked in shock before half of his spear fell to the ground, the spear body made of tough metal, having been sliced through in milliseconds like butter. To increase the guard's surprise, the weapon that had easily cut his spear had been nothing more and nothing less than a cracked and rusty sword that the white-haired boy had been carrying. The other guards behind him also looked surprised, but they quickly shook off their surprise to look at Bell as a threat. Just as they were about to go and charge at Bell, they were stopped by 2 gods. Stop. Stop. I am Ganesha. Everyone turned their gazes to find 2 gods together, one showing his entire muscular body and wearing an elephant mask and another with a feather hat. Guard. Ganesha-sama. Stay back, this guy is. Ganesha. Calm down, guard-san. Smiling and patting his back, this boy and his daughter are my guests and of the god Hermes, they are here on important matters, smiling. Hermes. Don't worry, they're not from Evilis or Rakia, smiling. Guard. But, doubtful. Hermes. Also I doubt you want to mess with him, pointing at Bell. The guard turned his head towards Bell before freezing at the cold stare he was giving him, a stare as cold as ice that made him shiver. Guard. Well, lowering his head, we regret the inconvenience, but the situation at the clock is very delicate and we have to be cautious, bowing. Bell. It doesn't matter, serious. Bell put away the sword in a movement that demonstrated his mastery and made the guard tremble. How powerful did the guy in front of him have to be to make a level 3 tremble just by unsheathing and sheathing his weapon? It reminded him a little of a certain doll-faced blonde who had great swordsmanship for her age, but not even she had such a terrifying aura. Hermes. Well, now that our guards are scared, can we go talk somewhere quieter? Looking at Bell. Bell looked at him for a second with a frown, but nodded. He took Bellin by the hand again, who was hiding behind him, and they both began to walk following both gods, all this before the eyes of two blue-haired girls, one with sky blue hair and glasses and the other with dark blue hair, who looked cautiously at Bell. Hermes. Why? Kneeling in front of Bell. Bell. I definitely don't want to join your family, looking at him with disgust. Hermes. Don't look at me like that. Sniffling, I promise to be a good god. Begging him. Bell. I don't even need to join a family, that's stupid, and I definitely won't let the girl join your family, seriously, I would prefer Ganesha, but… Ganesha. I'm sorry, there are already too many of us, and let's say we are going through a financial problem, scratching his neck in embarrassment, in addition to the Astri family, we are the ones who ensure the safety of the people of Orario, and much of the money we invest is for that. Bell. Okay, sighing, I guess I'll have to find a family on my own, thinking. Hermes. And me what? Bell. You're out without looking at him, hey, who are the most powerful families in Orario right now? Looking at both gods. Hermes. Well, it's the Freya family and the Loki family. They currently have level 5 and 6 adventurers. Why do you ask? Don't tell me. Bell. No, it would be very difficult to enter high-esteem families with the current situation, Demas would be too suspicious, and Zeus and Hera warned me about Freya, in fact, Hera insisted too much on hitting her if I ever met her face to face, sighing. Hermes. Well, it sounds a lot like Hera, smiling. Bell. Anyway, I'll let you know if we manage to get into a family, looking at them. Hermes. Where are you going? Looking at him. Bell. I'll go to an inn, getting up, I'll see you later, leaving the room. Bellin. Bell Odin, are you sure you rejected the offer of the god Hermes? Looking at him curiously. Bell. It's a much better option, believe me, that god is up to something, at the moment it's not bad at all, but he can be both against me and in my favor at the same time, squinting, Ganesha gave me a detailed map of the city, I think I can get a good inn around here, looking at the map. Bellin. Bell Odin, hiding behind him. Bell. What's wrong? Looking at her. Bellin. Something bad is going to happen. Bell noticed Bellin's grip on his hand tighten and looked around for anything unusual. As he scanned the surrounding streets, his eyes widened in shock as his instincts screamed at him to protect himself. Bell. Hundreds of small but powerful explosions shook the city or forced people to hide or look for a place where the explosions would not reach them. Unfortunately, a few did not manage to escape and were treated by the explosion. Some looked at this with sadness, mainly because right in the center, there was a young father with his daughter who were surely dead, and so it was. End of story. Did you stay? Excellent. After the explosion stopped, only the black smoke that remained in almost the entire city could be seen, and that was gradually going away. Before the eyes of the people and a few novice adventurers who were hiding, several people wearing black robes and armor could be seen appearing in the clearing armed to the bone. In the center of them you could see a very large man who could easily rival and surpass the height of a certain dwarf named Mia, with dark reddish hair and gray eyes, as well as several scars on his face. He wore full-body black armor and a red cape with the symbol of a thunder. His simple figure imposed respect, and everyone there could feel the aura of power that emanated from him. Everyone was speechless. They knew him. He was one of those responsible for numerous losses of adventurers and supplies from Orario. It was Zald, former executive of the Zeus family, level 7, also known as Gluttony or Monster Eater. The man carried a large black sword resting on his shoulder. The weapon was easily seen as a first-class weapon, and to the terror of the people, it was stained with blood. Before anyone could even make a noise, the members of Evilus got to work and quickly began to plant more bombs in the city with a single purpose, to attract the attention of certain Orario families so that they fight against that monster, capable of devouring more monsters. Some members of Evilus went into the cloud of smoke to check if anyone survived. But Zald, living up to his level 7, reacted immediately and destroyed with his hand a giant spike of ice. Zald looked at the cloud of smoke from which hundreds of ice spikes protruded, piercing the bodies of several Evilus members who had entered the cloud of smoke. Zald. Magic. Curious. Just at that moment the cloud of smoke finished dispersing, and Zald could see with surprise how in the center there was an ice dome covered with ice spikes that looked terrifyingly hard. He knew it, despite having broken one of the ice spikes with only his hand, he felt how it cooled with a simple touch, and if he had not put all his strength into his legs, he would have flown away. Zald changed his calm look for an incredibly serious one. Whoever did that was powerful. Not only did he protect himself from the explosion in seconds, but he killed a quarter of the evilest members under his command with simple ice spikes that were bucking hard. The ice dome, like the peaks, began to thaw and turned into small pools of water with blood from the people he had impaled. Zald was surprised. His face may not show it, but in his eyes you could clearly see surprise. In front of him was a young boy who could not be older than 20 years, white hair and bright ruby eyes that seemed to ask for blood. Zald shuddered, his gaze reminding him of that black reptile that had ravaged his family years ago. Zald was going to get into a fighting stance, but realized something. He was already in a fighting stance. His body acted on instinct and prepared for the worst. L. That was annoying, you know. L sighed, letting a bit of cold air escape from his lips. His temperature was dropping, and that meant only one thing. Zald moved at great speed to the right, dodging an ice spike that would have pierced his head. His instinct screamed at him, and he quickly brandished his greatsword, and with it destroyed 3 ice spikes that were heading towards him. Belen Trevero's eyes. The man was strong, he had to admit it, but he was not at his level. Zald opened his eyes, and with his sword blocked a thrust that was heading for his chest. After blocking the sword, Zald could see the white-haired boy in front of him brandishing a silver sword. If Zald's eyes were already surprised, he almost remained speechless when he saw on the back of the white-haired boy a small girl equally white-haired with ruby eyes who looked at everything with surprise. Zald. A girl. Tightening his grip on his sword, Zald tried to push Bell with his great strength, but it was useless. He wasn't even able to move him a little. Zald started to sweat. He had never met someone with greater strength than his, except maybe his captain or Alfia, but he had already surpassed his captain. Zald. Who are you? Gripping the handle of his sword. Bell. Tell me, Bell, smiling. Zald saw the broken sword and tried to make a superhuman effort to break it completely, but again it was useless. The sword was still in that same state. For a moment Zald was scared. Not even his monster strength was able to break a cracked and rusty sword. He wondered who the hell had been the one who broke it and left it in that state. No, in fact, he didn't want to know. It was better not to know according to him. Bell knew what Zald was thinking and his smile widened. Even though it was in terrible condition, it was a magnificent sword. Not even he knew what it was made of or who created it. His master never revealed that to anyone, except maybe Arya, but nothing more. Bell. It's useless, the only thing that was able to crack it is still alive and ate your entire family. Squinting. Zald opened his eyes in shock. Memories of a large black creature of incredible power ravaging his family appeared in his mind. Memories he thought he had buried had returned like an old painful wound. Bell took advantage of Zald's moment of hesitation and let the big man's sword pass him by, while he took the opportunity to give him a large cut on the chest. Zald's armor prevented it from touching his skin, but he still wasn't saved from a large cut down the middle of his armor. Zald gritted his teeth and brandished his sword fiercely. This was no longer a game. He didn't know who this guy was or where he had come from, but he couldn't lose so easily. With a swift and fierce movement, Zald boy swords with Bell, who felt his arm slightly numb. Bell. He's strong, I have to admit. Squinting, this guy might be at L.E.G.A.D's level in terms of strength. Bell was brought out of his thoughts when he had to block a flurry of powerful blows that were even forcing him to retreat. Bell frowned and also attacked Zald. His movements were fast, fluid, and he possessed great technique. Zald was having a hard time blocking his cuts. He felt a warm liquid fall from his cheek, and with his tongue he licked it. His eyes opened. It was blood, his blood. On his cheek he had a small cut that had reached him. Zald increased his speed, but still more and more cuts began to fill his armor. In one of those cuts, Bell and Zald attacked each other, trying to push him. Zald had both hands on his great sword, while Bell had one hand on the hilt of his sword and another on the blade. He is putting more force to push Zald. For a moment they were even, at least until Zald's arms began to weaken from the great pressure they were forced to endure, and slowly Zald began to lose. Zald knew that if this continued like this it would end in exhaustion, so he loosened his grip on his left hand and quickly directed a left hook towards Bell's face. The blow would have connected squarely with Bell's face if it weren't for a minor annoyance. Bellin. Down. Closing his eyes. Bell without hesitation ducked, letting Zald swing forward without being able to control his strength. Bell gave him a strong kick in the back and sent him crashing into a dumpster. Bell took a small breath and looked at Zald's inert body. The guy had great strength and from what he could see a lot of experience. If he wasn't mistaken he should be in his 40s. Bellin B. Bell Odison, pointing to his cheek. Bell touched with his hand the place where Bellin pointed and was surprised to see a small cut that was leaking a thin line of blood. Bell smiled, the bastard had gotten revenge for the cut from earlier. Bell removed his smile and then looked at the girl on his back. He didn't know how she had noticed the attack even before him, especially the blow that had probably left him a little disoriented. He didn't know if it was because all children were more perceptive or if she had a large institution. Whatever it was, she saved him from a nasty burn. But Bell was brought out of his thoughts when the little girl on his back spoke to him again. "Bellin. It's moving," pointing to Zald. Bell blinked and put his thoughts aside to look at Zald, who was slowly getting up while removing some trash from him. "Bell. You really should take a bath after that," looking at him. Zald hummed, annoyed. "The evilest member. What are we doing, Zald-sama?" Helping him. Zald. "We retreat, serious. MDE, evilest member for short XD. Are you sure?" Zald. "Loki and Freya's family are getting closer, and with him here we won't have a guaranteed victory, we need the others," looking seriously at Bell. MDE. "Yes sir," whistling, "we're all leaving." Looking at his companions. MDE 2. "And what will we do with the pumps we already installed?" MDE. "Activate them." Bell. "No." Frowning. Bell rushed towards the evilest members, brandishing his sword with great speed, but just as he was about to slice the neck of one of them, another black sword got in his way. Bell. "Get out of the way, seriously." Zald. "Force me, seriously." Bell growled and increased the force in his thrust, forcing Zald to retreat, but not to get out of the way. And that gave Evilus enough time to activate the bombs. "Bellin. Watch out." Hugging Bell. Bell reacted immediately, and knowing that it was better to listen to Bellin, he quickly moved away and cast his magic again. Mim. Hundreds and hundreds of explosions sounded throughout the city of Orario, covering an area completely in smoke. Zald looked back for a moment, knowing that this wouldn't kill him, but it would give them a chance to escape. Zald. "Let's go." Serious. The evilest members quickly retreated, leaving the bodies of the people they killed in the area, as well as the streets and houses destroyed. We arrived very late. A little close by you could see a blonde Palom, a tall elf with jade green hair, and a bearded dwarf looking at the cloud of smoke with sadness. Finn. Why would they want to do an attack like that? Aerith. Those bastards, did they just do it to kill innocent people? Annoyed. Riveria. Whatever it is, we're too late. Next time we'd better prepare for another situation like this. We can't allow something like this to happen again, lowering her head. Finn. Let's go. Riveria and Gareth nodded slowly and began walking back towards the Twilight Mansion. Finn stood there for a moment, observing a minute of silence and respect for those he could not protect. But as the smoke faded, he opened his eyes in surprise when inside it he saw several domes made of ice. Whatever it was extremely hard enough to withstand the explosions. Finn. Guys. Victeniad towards Riveria and Gareth. The two senior executives turned to look at their captain, and their eyes widened in surprise at the sight of those ice domes. Riveria. Magic. Surprised, but who? Crash. Everyone fell silent as the domes began to crack, cracking more and more with each second. What are those things? Riveria Aiz, looking at her, stay behind us, we don't know exactly what's in them, would be. Finn. I think we get the picture, smiling slightly. Aerith. Whoever did it, we'll have to thank them later, closing his eyes. Ian. Hey. Epically entering the chat, wow. With a twinkle in her eyes, and that. You did it, Riveria. Looking at her. Riveria. No, it wasn't me, looking at the domes. Before anyone could say another word, the first dome broke apart and everyone could see a large figure in it. Everyone looked at the figure expectantly, but with their guard up, he carried a sword with him. While everyone was on guard, Aiz opened her eyes in shock and took a step forward. Riveria Aiz. Confused. Aiz started walking towards the person who had his back to her. She quickly increased her speed, ignoring the words of caution from Riveria and the others. Without realizing it, she dropped her sword desperate, letting it fall to the ground while she began to run towards that guy. Bell heard the soft sound of very fast passes running towards him and turned around. He didn't sense any bad intentions, so he didn't point the cracked sword at his attacker, but his eyes widened in shock when a familiar golden hair appeared in his sight. Bell couldn't even finish speaking when a golden blur attacked him in a tight hug. Aiz. Bell, hugging him tightly. Bell looked at her for a second before stabbing his sword into the ground and wrapping Aiz in a hug. Bell. It's been a long time. Aiz, smiling slightly. Aiz tightened the hug when she heard those words. She wasn't wrong, it really was him, he was beautiful. Bell. You've grown a lot, looking at her. Aiz, what's going on? Bell blinked when an unfamiliar voice sounded and raised his head to look at several people who had their weapons pointed at him as they looked at him cautiously. Aiz also looked at this and completely ignored it and simply snuggled up in Bell's arms. Everyone was surprised, they had never seen Aiz act like that, not even with Riveria who was like a second mother to her, and here she was now, hugging so affectionately a guy they had never seen or heard of in their lives. Finn was staring at him, studying him, he had white hair and red eyes, he almost looked like a rabbit. But his eyes strayed towards a little girl with white hair and red eyes who appeared behind the boy, she almost looked like a female version of him. Aiz was taken out of her comfort zone when small hands grabbed her and forcefully pulled her away from Bell. Ellen. Leave Bell Odin alone. Hugging him. Finn looked at the scene curiously, she was a daughter who did not want to lose her father's attention, something beautiful that would even move her heart if it weren't for the situation they were in. Bell. I think we need to talk all of us, looking at the whole Loki family. Loki Family 04. In a well-known mansion called Twilight Mansion, more specifically in the office room of a certain red-haired goddess, were the aforementioned, along with a bearded dwarf, a jade-haired high elf, and a blonde palom. The three of them watched in silence the interaction between a golden-haired girl and a white-haired man. Bell. I understand, meditating. Aiz was silent for a moment before speaking. Aiz. Is she really your daughter? Sitting in the desk chair where Loki should have been was a white-haired girl reading a book about heroes while she waited for Bell to finish his talk. Bell. Not really, I'll explain later, looking at her. Bell remained silent, watching Aiz, who tilted her head in confusion. Bell. You're just like your mother, rubbing his head. Aiz blushed slightly and gave a small smile. Bell was like an older brother to her, the times she had gone to her house to train with her father he played with her, sometimes he even gave her candy behind her mother's back, who didn't allow her to eat it unless she finished her vegetables, which she never did. Bell. Well, we have plenty of time, what do you think if we talk? Aiz. Curious. Bell. I'm interested in knowing what you've been doing since you woke up, looking at her. Aiz nodded with a sparkle in her eyes, she longed to tell him what had happened to her since the Loki family began to take care of her. Aiz. Ah. Opening her eyes. Bell was confused by Aiz's sudden reaction, his confusion increased when Aiz took him by the hand and pulled him towards the three senior executives of his family, more specifically towards Riveria. Bell and Riveria looked at each other in puzzlement as Aiz stood between them. Aiz. She is Riveria, pointing at her, she is the one who takes care of me, introducing her. Riveria. A pleasure, sweating. Riveria began to sweat at the intense pressure in Bell's gaze and was relieved when he cast that gaze aside and gave her a smile. Bell. Nice to meet you, Miss Riveria, bowing slightly. Aiz. He is Bunny, introducing Bell. Riveria eh? Aiz you don't have 5 to keep calling me that anymore, sighing. Aiz he is Bell, pointing at Bell. Riveria. A taste of Bell, bowing slightly. Aiz. I'll teach you the rest, pulling Bell. Bell let himself be dragged by Aiz who took him all over the mansion, teaching him different kinds of things, completely forgetting the others who looked at Bell confused, and obviously in the office Loki, Riveria, Gareth and Finn were left perplexed without reacting. Riveria. She looks happy, looking where Aiz and Bell went. Finn. It seems he was his father's student, thoughtful. Riveria. Maybe we can ask him or Aiz about that, looking at Finn. Gareth. That's not going to happen, closing his eyes. Riveria ah. Finn. Well, from what we could see when he interacted with Loki, he doesn't like the gods, so he can easily take Aiz and simply disappear. Riveria. That won't happen, reacting sharply, I won't allow him to take Aiz, it would be. Finn. Are you going to stop him? Raising an eyebrow, I remind you that according to the testimonies of the people who saved him from the evilous attack, he was able to handle Predator with ease. In other words, he is stronger than a level 7, probably more than a level 8, and these are just assumptions. Riveria remained silent, it was true, if she attacked Bell, it was possible that she would lose more than she would gain. Gareth. You're scaring her Finn, amused. Finn. Sorry, I missed it, laughing nervously. Riveria. What are you laughing at? Frowning. Finn. Well, it wouldn't be so easy for Bell to take her out of the Loki family, the main reason is Aiz, you saw how she wanted to interact, because she loves you, she won't abandon the family easily, smiling. Gareth. Haha you should have seen your scared face, laughing. Riveria had a twitch in her eyebrow before she started singing. The flames will soon be released. Gareth. Run, little one. Run. Running. Finn. Don't call me a little old dwarf. Running. The two senior executives ran away while being followed by Riveria. Loki. Alone, going to his desk. Loki. Well I'll drink some soma and. Loki fell silent upon seeing a little white-haired girl there. Ellen. Hello. Smiling. Loki. That's my desk. Ellen. I know, smiling. Loki. Ellen. Smiling. Loki. I'm leaving. Ellen bye-bye. Saying goodbye, now what was he up to? Reading his book. Aiz. Are you going to train me? With a twinkle in her eyes. Bell. Sure, I'll teach you the same thing your father taught me, but first we need 2 swords. Aiz. In the armory there are some quality weapons, looking at him. Bell no. Aiz. Bell. We don't need quality, we'll use simple swords, walking towards the armory. Aiz but. Bell. It's part of the training, smiling slightly. Aiz nodded and walked behind Bell. Bell and Aiz walked through the halls of the Twilight Mansion calmly. They were on their way to the armory, but before arriving, they met a black-haired man with 2 swords. The black-haired man looked at both of them and became excited. Brawl. Who are you? Nervous. Bell didn't know it, but he released an aura similar to that of a first class, so anyone who saw him would think he was one, even worse, a low-level person would tremble before his imposing aura. Aiz. We came for 2 training swords, expressionless. Brawl sweated, the swords he had grabbed were the last ones left. At that moment 2 options came to his mind. 1, leave with the swords and probably be attacked by the white-haired man and the golden-haired woman, or 2, give them to them and be attacked by Aki. Brawl. At least here he is the same level as me, extending the swords to them, take it. Bell took the swords and left with Aiz, who didn't say anything. Brawl. A thank you at least, sighing, since. Brawl gave up and left. He knew he couldn't blame Aiz for anything, she was a higher level than him, and she also had a great talent, despite the fact that Aiz and he had started being adventurers at the same time. Aiz had reached level 3 a few months ago, while he had barely reached level 2. Brawl. Now for the beating here, huh? And my knives. Looking at his waist. Bell. Take these knives, giving him some knives. Bellin looked at both weapons with a shine in his eyes and took them, this under the gaze of Aiz, who frowned. Aiz. Hers are second class, looking at Bellin's knives, this one looks like a guild sword, looking at the sword with reluctance. Bell. Today I will train both of them, looking at them. Both nodded excitedly, obviously Bellin showed it more. Aiz. One question, why are their weapons better than ours? Looking at the sword Bell had. Bell. The training will be different and the weapons are different and their styles too. For Bellin, the best thing is to have a strong weapon that can withstand the worst. You can also have a weapon like that, but it will be after you learn to use a sword, as it is unsheathing the training sword. Aiz looked at the training sword in confusion. Aiz. It's not very sharp and is made of ordinary metal, it would break easily, looking at it. Bell. Only if you don't know how to use it, approaching a tree. Bellin and Aiz looked at Bell, who raised his arm slightly. Bell. You just have to know how to handle it. Slash. Both opened their eyes when they saw the tree split in half with a clean and quick cut. The sword had no cracks and its edge was not worn, it was surprising. Bell. Okay, since Bellin has never fought, I'll first teach him a few stances that he'll repeat until I tell you to stop. You, on the other hand, looking at Aiz, fight with me. Aiz shivered at the dangerous glint in Bell's eyes. She knew him, she knew this was to see her technique can also beat her. Bell. Keep going, don't forget those movements and repeat them. If you make a mistake, make sure to memorize where you went wrong and correct it next time, looking at Bellin. Bellin hi. Canada. Bell. Now, turning to see Aiz, attacks, unsheathing his sword. Aiz got into a fighting stance and quickly rushed towards Bell. Bell narrowed his eyes and just as Aiz was in front of him to stab him with a quick movement, his sword collided with Aiz's, deflecting it to the right. Aiz gripped his sword tightly and tried to cut Bell's arm. This time Bell decided to clash swords to see their strength. Aiz's arms trembled when her sword collided with Bell's, she felt like she had hit a wall of adamantine, and Bell was holding back. Bell narrowed his eyes as he saw Aiz's sword crack slightly. Aiz tried to cut Bell in the leg. Bell decided to test his reflexes and launched a slash at his face, one slow enough that Aiz didn't have much difficulty dodging it. Or so he thought. Aiz narrowly dodged the attack by moving her head a little and ignoring a cut on her right cheek. Despite Bell's attack, she did not stop and on the contrary, prepared to give him a cut on the abdomen. Just as his sword was about to cut it, Bell's sword got in the way. Aiz opened her eyes as she felt her arm go completely numb, while some cracks appeared on her sword. Aiz stood a few feet away from Bell and looked at the sword. Aiz. It's going to break, whispering. Aiz separated her legs a little, ready to give Bell one last attack, but before Aiz could attack again, Bell stopped her. Bell détente, raising his hand. Aiz stopped and looked at Bell in confusion. Bell. I'm not a monster, looking at her. Aiz. Bell. Your technique, it's very flawed, very fierce, even for a heavy sword, and you fight without protection. Your style is only attack, and then you change it to one of minimal defense, looking at her, and you don't trust your sword. Aiz opened her eyes at Bell's words and looked at her sword with her head down. Aiz. I need a better sword. Bell. First you need to be less rude, not many swords could withstand a style as aggressive as yours, and you also need to trust, not be afraid of your sword breaking, looking at her. Aiz. How can I not feel scared if it's like this? Showing the cracked sword. L. Ah, sighing, I see you still have a lot to learn, approaching her, take my sword, and you give me yours. Aiz did what he asked and looked confused at Bel's sword. L grabbed the cracked sword and examined it. L. Hold the sword in front of you, looking at Aiz. Aiz was confused but did what he asked, she didn't know why he wanted her to extend the sword, was she going to compare them? Before Aiz said anything, he was only able to hear the sound of a cut. Slash. Aiz opened her eyes and looked at her sword, it was cut in half, a clean cut. I look at Bell in disbelief, the cracked sword was exactly the same as it was before. L. Strength is not always necessary to make a swordsman fearsome, technique is also important, you cannot fight only using technique or only using strength, you need balance, sword sheathed, if you manage to achieve the perfect balance, even using a branch you will be able to cut through steel, just like Albert, smiling slightly. Aiz opened her eyes, she knew about her father's amazing technique, but she couldn't imagine something like cutting steel with a branch. L. Okay, let's go and you can stop now, Bellin, and I'm Droplet. Poof. It was the sound that the body of an exhausted white-haired girl made when she fell to the soft grass after practicing for a long time. Drrrrrrrr. And that was the sound that the stomachs of the three made together. L. I think it would be best to go eat first, looking at Aiz embarrassed. L carried Bellin under Aiz's glare and left the training yard to go eat, obviously followed by Aiz. L, Bellin, Aiz y Riveria. They were on their way to an already known bar called the Hostess of Fertility, a bar that had opened shortly before the beginning of the Dark Age and had become quite famous and visited by adventurers. In fact, the place was so visited that members of Evilis went there, not to gather information, just to chat and have a good time. How was it possible? Well, obviously, they didn't wear their robes with the Evilis symbol. They went as normal people or adventurers. But some of them got so drunk that they simply spoke without fear and ended up revealing their identity. Bell inspected the place, it had a quiet atmosphere, and there were not many people. Riveria. It's morning, usually the place is always full at dusk and closed at night, looking at Bell. Bell nodding. Do you want a table, Naya? Riveria. Yes please, looking at a catgirl. Anya. Right away Naya. Smiling. Anya led them to a table and gave them a menu. Anya. I'll be back later to take your order Naya, leaving. The table fell silent, Bell simply shrugged and began to read the menu. Riveria. How did it go there? Looking at her. Aiz in what? Riveria. In training, I heard that Bell trained you, looking at her. Aiz. It went well, although we broke one sword in half and cracked another. Riveria. I see, sighing, the good thing is that they were only the training ones, they are not really expensive. Bell stopped reading the menu and looked at Riveria. Bell. That was good, we'll need a couple dozen, chibi. Riveria pseudo, they may not cost much, but if I bought at the rate that Aiz was breaking them, I would probably end up spending more than 1 million valis in a month. Riveria. Just don't break them so quickly, sighing. Aiz high, nodding. Riveria. Wait, suddenly opening her eyes, that means you're staying, right? Staring at him. Bell. Huh. Yeah, I don't think Aiz wants to leave the Loki family, and I can't force her. Riveria looked at him before smiling slightly. Riveria. I see, relieved. Bell. You care about her a lot, looking at her out of the corner of your eye. Riveria. I was in charge of taking care of her when she arrived. If I'm honest, it was extremely difficult at first. She didn't speak at all and always had a knack for sneaking off to go to jail. Plus, she always defied me and refused to obey, sighing. Well, nothing a good swim workout can't fix, looking away. Aiz, who was listening to Bellin talk about his tales of heroes, felt a chill run down her spine. Bell was confused by Riveria's comment but decided not to investigate further. Anya. Do you know what to order yet? Appearing out of nowhere. Bell looked at Anya for a moment before nodding. Bell. Give me the special of the day, calm down. Riveria. Give me today's recommendation, relax. Aiz. The same as he or she, pointing to Bell Riveria. Anya. And to drink. All. Juice. Before I know Anya asked what the others responded as if they read her thoughts. All. Orange. Anya get immediately. Anya walked away, letting everyone talk again. Bellin. And the man killed the Minotaur Asterion, thus preventing him from taking more sacrifices for himself, and while the hero was healed by his companions, no one noticed that the Minotaur's corpse was stolen by a dragon and taken to the dungeon where the dungeon made him one of its monsters, and that is the story of the hero Theseus and the birth of the Minotaur in the dungeon, smiling happily. Aiz was silent listening to Belen's stories. She had to admit that she was a little interested in what she read. While Belen asked Aiz several questions about the story he had just told her, Bel and Riveria started talking again. Riveria. You and she need a place to stay, looking at Belen. Bel. There are inns, calm down. Riveria. They are not safe today. Bel. I am strong. Riveria. I don't doubt it, but I'm sure you felt the power of the man in black armor. There is another person even more powerful than him, plus hundreds of adventurers on his side. Even you won't be able to protect her, looking at Belen. Bel. Bel remained thoughtful. It was true, he could not stay in an inn. The guy in black armor was strong, he could defeat him, but with a group of adventurers and another person as powerful as he would, it would not be very difficult for them to kill Belen while blocking his way. Bel started to think about what he could do until Riveria spoke. Riveria. You can stay at the Twilight Mansion, looking at her. Bel looked at her for a second before asking. Bel. Why would they leave me? Riveria. Benefits, smiling, you would train Aiz every day, and you will help me with his academic education, looking at him, in addition, you will help us defeat Evilis, staring at him. Bel. Ready L. Fine, I'll help you with your problem, and we'll live there until Evilis is defeated, crossing arms, but I won't train anyone else. Riveria. Okay, nodding. Before. Your orders Naya, smiling. Anya appeared leaving 4 plates for each of us and an orange juice. Bel and Belen looked at a large plate of spaghetti and Riveria and Aiz a normal plate of grilled fish with lettuce. Belen eats a lot, looking scared at the plate. Bel. Ah, I'll eat whatever you leave, sighing. Belen A isn't that much for you? Bel. Oh believe me, centuries frozen in that egg leave you very hungry, even after days, starting to eat. Bel began to eat calmly but in large quantities, disliking his food. Belen tried to eat as much as possible, and Riveria began to eat calmly and with manners. Obviously Aiz didn't follow his example and simply poked at the fish until he grabbed some meat with his fork and started eating. Riveria. What have I told you about manners? Frowning. Aiz looked at her and continued eating. She was not mannered and would not be, or so she thought. Aiz, what would Arya-sama and Albert say? Aiz stopped and lowered his head slightly. Aiz. A princess doesn't do that. Bel. Just that. Oh, how strange. He used to hit me on the head with a spoon, remembering an annoying Arya. Aiz River a little surprising Riveria. Bel. Just try to eat with more manners, eating again. Aiz stopped chopping the fish and began to carefully cut it to take a bit of meat. His manners were the best, but at least he wasn't chopping it anymore. Riveria. Maybe educating her will be easier than I thought, looking at Aiz. After a pleasant dinner, Bel and the others returned to the Twilight Mansion. Riveria. Now, we must talk to the others, looking seriously at Bel. Aiz, looking at her. Aiz. Tilts head. Bel. Take care of Belen while I'm gone, I have to discuss some matters with your goddess in the Palom, the dwarf and Riveria, looking at Aiz. Aiz nodded and walked away while being followed by Belen. Riveria and Bel walked towards Loki's office where they were waiting for them. Loki. I want you to join the family, smiling. Belmi, Jago, tranquilo. Loki. Please. I've already begged you more than 6 times. Hugging her legs. Bel. And I already rejected you 6 times, sighing. Loki. Come on, I promise to be a good goddess. Sniffling. Bel. Deja vu. Tired. Finn. Leave it Loki, you're making him uncomfortable, and that only gives him more reasons not to accept, smiling. Bel. What the Palom said, looking at Loki. Finn. I know Loki can be annoying sometimes, but think about what it could do to have a Falna. I know you're strong, but if Falna could increase your power, looking at him. Bel. I don't need more power, besides I get stronger faster without Falna than with Falna, looking at Finn. Finn. I understand. Before Bel left the office, Riveria spoke. Riveria. Before you go, can you tell us something? Looking at him. Bel thought about it for a moment and nodded. Riveria. As far as I understand, spirits cannot have children, and according to what I know from Aiz, you had children with an Amazon, and Aiz's mother had her with a human, looking at him. Bel. Bel was silent for a few minutes before answering. Bel. Before me there were spirits that controlled the ice, usually the ice spirits were not very strong except for me, so they dedicated themselves to something else, the rituals, looking at Riveria out of the corner of their eye, thanks to my people, rituals were created so that spirits could have children with any race, such as beast man, paloms, dwarves, Amazons and elves, it was something uncommon, but it happened from time to time. A spirit that falls in love with a race other than ours, remembering several white-haired spirits. The spirit can only have children with another spirit, and depending on which is stronger, the child is born controlling the element of the strongest. The ritual we created allows us to have children with different races, in exchange for not having access to their power as spirits. Riveria. In short, the children you had with that Amazon couldn't control ice, looking at him. L. Correct, nodding. Riveria. That doesn't explain Aiz. Aiz has wind spirit magic, would be. Ella, that's why Arya-sama didn't do that ritual, closing her eyes. Riveria. So? L. Something more complex, leaving. Everyone remained silent, wondering what Aiz's mother had done to have her and keep her wind power. Elsewhere, Belle was walking calmly through the halls of the Twilight Mansion. L. I know they're hiding there, looking at the corner of a hallway. Aiz and Bellin, who were hiding, became excited and ran away under Belle's gaze. Both. Sorry. L. It doesn't matter anymore, walking. Ellen and Aiz followed Belle to the training yard. L. Fine, they'll train again, crossing arms. Ellen. Aiz nodded calmly. Bellin, practice your stances again, giving him 2 knives. Ellen. Since, taking them. Bell, take, giving a sword to Aiz. Aiz calmly took the sword and unsheathed it. L. We're also going to practice stances, unsheathing his sword. Aiz nodded and began to copy the same postures as Belle as best she could. While they were doing this, Aiz seemed thoughtful. L. You're distracted, what's going on? Aiz. We heard their conversation, looking at him. L.Y. Aiz. How was I born? Looking at him. L stopped his movements and looked at Aiz. L. Does that matter? Raising an eyebrow. Aiz. No, but I'm curious, looking at him. L. Technically they were going to tell you when you were 18, glancing at her, but. Aiz looked at him hopefully, wondering what he might say to her. L. I'm no exception, Chibi, I'll tell you when you're 18, going back to posing. Aiz deflated and looked listlessly at Belle. Aiz. There's still a long way to go, going back to making postures. L. I'll tell you a phrase that Albert gave me, patience is bitter, but its fruits are sweet. When I tell you how you were born, you'll understand why I didn't reveal it to you. Now go back to training, looking at her out of the corner of my eye. Aiz. Hi. L. Say hi, maestro, looking at her. Aiz looked at him with reluctance. Aiz. I won't do it until you tell me how I was born, crossing his arms. Before Belle could speak, a scream interrupted him. Belle-sama. Standing in front of him, when will I have armor like Aiz's? Excited. Belle. When you finish your training and I think you're ready to go to the dungeon, looking at her. Ellen. It's okay, smiling. Belle. Oh, one more thing, can you call me master? Smiling. Ellen. Huh. Of course, teacher. Smiling. Belle. Good girl, that's why you're my favorite, rubbing her head. Ellen. Laughing foolishly. Aiz twitched and looked at Belle. Aiz maestro. Belle. How easy, fun, if Aiz. Smiling. Aiz. Can you rub my head too? Belle laughed a little and also began to rub Aiz's head, remembering when Arya rubbed her and Albert's heads after a hard workout. It was already night in Orario. In a large room with 2 beds, Belle was covering Bellin with a blanket. He had read Bellin a book of heroes to help him sleep. He had to admit it to Zeus. It was a good idea to make a book with different short stories about heroes for Bellin. Belle saw that next to Bellin there was a bed a little bigger, for him obviously, but he didn't like warm places very much, so he left the room to look for a colder place to sleep. As he left the room to go to a cooler place to rest, he noticed that the door next door opened, revealing Riveria, who looked tired. She looked at Belle with slight surprise and greeted him. L. Is that Aiz's room? Raising an eyebrow. Riveria. Yes, I was checking to make sure she was sleeping, tired. L. You look tired. Riveria. A cup of tea wouldn't hurt, sighing, you look so shiny this morning. L. Advantages of being a spirit, I don't need to rest much, leaving. Riveria. Where are you going? L. I want to be in a cold place. Riveria. You can go to the dining room, at this time it's empty, and since there are big windows it's always cold, besides I'll go with you, if someone saw you they would suspect you loitering around there late at night, walking next to him. Belle hum. As they walked, Riveria decided to start a little conversation. Riveria. How did you meet Bellin? Looking at him. L. Bellin. I met an old god and a goddess who took care of her, apparently their families died, and she was the daughter of 2 of their members. They took care of me for a while, but unfortunately they died from an accident with monsters. I have taken care of Bellin since then. Riveria. I see, smiling. Belle looked at Riveria for a second and spoke. L. You care so much about Aiz, I'm glad she had someone to take care of her, smiling slightly. Riveria. Well, I couldn't let anyone else here take care of her, they don't even know how to take care of themselves, much less a little girl. Oh, we arrived. Elle looked around and it was a very large dining room. Elle. This place is huge. Riveria. There are a lot of us, so the place must be big. Walking. 3 hours had passed and in the kitchen Belle and Riveria were still talking about Aiz and Belen. Riveria. And since her swimming training, she's been afraid of water, drinking her 7th cup of tea. Elle. I don't know if that can be called training, and I'm Droplet, all that just to call you old. Riveria. I'm not old. Stopping abruptly, I'm only 92, slamming her hand on the table. The place fell silent after Riveria's words, who was just realizing her mistake. Riveria. Still motionless. Elle. 92 years old, amazing. Riveria. Not a word. Elle. I won't say anything, calmly. Riveria sighed and sat back down reluctantly. Few knew her age, and she was embarrassed to say it because she didn't want to be called old. Elle. 92 years old, and you still look young and beautiful. Elle took the cup of tea that Riveria had given him before, he hadn't taken it until now because he was waiting for it to cool down. While drinking tea, he didn't even notice the blush on Riveria's cheeks until he put his tea aside. Elle. What's going on? Raising an eyebrow. Riveria turned her face away and whispered. Riveria. Don't pretend like nothing's happening after a courtship like that, embarrassed. L.A. Confused. Riveria. Fool, if you're going to court me you should make sure you take responsibility afterward, drinking her tea. While Riveria drank her tea, trying to hide the blush on her cheeks, Belle remembered a little conversation she had in the past. Idiot, if you're going to court me you should make sure you take responsibility afterward. Belle. How curious that your descendant said those same words. Zeldia, nostalgic. Riveria covered herself a little with her coat when she noticed a current of wind passing by. Riveria. It's a bit cold, cover up a bit. Elle. I know, it's refreshing, smiling with pleasure. Riveria. You like the cold a lot. There's a window in your room. Why didn't you just open it? Raising an eyebrow. Elle. The last time I did that, Belen ended up getting sick because of me, scratching his neck. Riveria. I understand, laughing a little. Elle. Hey Riveria, looking at her. Riveria, did you send? Aiz is Arya, calm down. Riveria, eh? Perplexed. Elle. Oh shit, I said it, looking at the tea, what's wrong with this? Riveria got up from the table in surprise. Riveria. See, could you repeat that? With her eyes open. Elle. Before that, promise that you won't tell anyone about this, not even Aiz, seriously. Riveria nodded seriously. Elle. As I told you, there is a ritual for a spirit to have children with other races, but in doing so the child loses total control of their powers. They have them, but cannot use them. I offered that ritual to Arya-sama to have a son or daughter as she wanted, but she rejected it. She wanted her child to be able to use wind magic, as it was the age of monsters. There were many dangers, and Arya-sama knew it. That's why she wanted her child to have her magic to protect herself. There was no way to have a child and have him obtain his spirit powers. I knew how much Arya-sama wanted to have a child and take care of him, and how much she wanted him to have his powers, so like my ancestors I created, or in this case I modified, a ritual for myself. Riveria. A ritual? Of what? Elle. There is a ritual where a spirit can separate a piece of its soul and give it to someone else. It can be a spirit or any other being, living or non-living. There have been many spirits who have done it, according to what is known, like Jupiter, spirit of lightning, who gave a piece of his soul to a sword, Kendo's, spirit of the forge, who gave it to a red-haired man, according to what that perverted old man told me. And Saimi, spirit of the moon, who gave it to a newborn who was sick so she could survive. I modified the ritual to fulfill Arya-sama's wish. The main thing for the ritual was to use some of Arya's hair, some of Albert's blood, among other things. The ritual created the physical body of a baby, and we used the soul to give it life. In simple words, Aiz is a clone of Arya-sama with her, and Albert's personality, and some physical aspects of Albert. That is why she is not the same as Arya, despite being her clone. Drinking some tea, I feel very calm, enough to tell you this. What is the tea made of? Curious. Riveria. It's a special tea made to relax those who drink it, processing the information. Elle. Oh, that makes sense, finishing his unspoken tea. Riveria. This it's a lot to process, thoughtful. Elle. I know, that's why I haven't told her. If you're surprised, imagine how she's feeling. Being her daughter and being so young could change how she sees everything. She's still young, she's not ready to process this, standing up. Riveria nodded. It was true, it wouldn't be if Aiz discovered this at such a young age. Seeing that the atmosphere became a little uncomfortable, she decided to give a small joking comment to ease it. Riveria. Do you said I was still young, are you trying to tell me I'm not? Looking at him out of the corner of your eye. Elle. L, who had gotten up to leave his cup of tea in the sink, looked at Riveria in confusion. L. As far as I know, in elven standards you are barely a young girl, approaching her, and a very beautiful one in my opinion, touching her cheek. L gave her a beautiful smile before walking quietly to his room, unable to see Riveria's head release smoke. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown in left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.